Welcome to the USMLE Seminar. Today we have with us Dr. Mouhit Mirchandani, an LFHK graduate who is doing his residency in the USA, and Baria Ahmad, a final year medical student who has recently finished her step one. And they will be discussing about how to prepare for the step one examination and how to prepare for the matching and get your residency in the USA. And before I let them begin with the seminar, I would just like to mention if you could please write any questions you have during the seminar on the chat, and we'll get back to you with those at the end of the seminar after they have finished explaining what they want to explain first. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Good luck with the seminar.
Okay. So I hope everyone can see the screen, and I'm going to assume that you can. I'm just going to proceed. So like Harsh mentioned, I'm going to basically talk about step one, preclinical preparation, the clinical preparation, and then Mohit will take over and talk about everything afterwards. And just heads up, honestly, I don't know if Harsh said this or not, questions in the chat for now. I'm not going to answer them while I'm going through the presentation, but at the end, after Mohit speaks and everything, we can cover everything I didn't talk about or didn't go into enough depth. Anyways, so I went through the questions that you guys put through the forms, and what I could see was that it was mainly questions about preparation for first year or like how to get into the mindset of doing step one. So for now, if anyone here is like from first to third year, which I consider preclinical preparation for preclinical years, the three things that I would say that you need to focus on is resources, extracurriculars, and US clinical experience, but the most right now is the resources. So the thing is, I think before a lot of seniors told me that, you don't have to worry too much about it now, worry about it in third year. I disagree, honestly. I think now in the first 2 years is the best time to experiment with resources, because the more you realize what works for you and which video resources or what textbooks work for you, the less time you have to worry about that later on when you're in fourth or fifth year and actually have to study for step one. So in the presentation, you can see I've written down what sources I used. And just to preface, like everything I'm going to explain is just what worked for me. Again, if it doesn't work for you, or like you find that it's not accurate, do as suits you. But for me, first year, I basically use USMLE RX and Lecturio. They're both kind of video resources, I would say mainly. RX has a kind of textbook that goes along with it, and I found it helpful for anatomy and histology. Second year is stuff maybe you guys have already heard about, is Boards and Beyond and Sketchy. Sketchy mainly for microbiome, and Boards and Beyond for chemistry, biochemistry, and physio. And third year was mainly Pathoma and MBOS. So again, this is the time where you have to look through these, figure out what works for you. And they're essentially building blocks for your step one preparation. And I would emphasize that everyone asks, like, what's the best way to prepare for it? Honestly, study for your test. Make sure you're doing your micro test well, your credits or whatever it is. Study thoroughly and study alongside with these resources. It's not like you're doing anything extra for step one during this time. You're just making sure that while you're studying for LFHK tests, you're also integrating stuff that's also relevant for step one later on, and then for later on when you're trying to remember things, it will come back to you because you've used resources like that. So first 30 years, experiment. Extracurriculars, I didn't personally do many. I think the only thing I was doing in the first 3 years was the ISU education seminars. I was part of the committee as well. And, that helped obviously to consolidate knowledge, and mainly these, only fourth year onwards did I really try to integrate into like corpus or like, start TCSD and stuff like that. And according to like doctors I've met and spoken to in US, what I've learned is that you have to build a character and like pitch yourself to them when you're doing interviews and all this, right? So when you're doing extracurriculars, don't just be like, oh, let me just do everything and run yourself dry, honestly, right? Choose things that you think work really well for your character and like something that makes you shine, I guess, in a cringy way. But that's like the best way to go about it. And I think the three things that I learned when I was talking to doctors was that if you can show skills and your participation in teamwork, leadership, or initiative, these are the best things that they want to see. And they're usually asking you questions around these three things. And then US clinical experience. So there's observerships and clinical electives. Observerships are basically like shadowing doctors, similar to what you guys do in practicals now, like in the hospitals, maybe in third years. You're following doctors, but you won't be able to touch patients. You're not doing any hands-on work, right? And if you want, I didn't do any US observerships during the first 3 years. But it could be a good idea to get a head start on, because you're learning the US system, you're learning how doctors or residents or fellows there work, and you're basically learning that lifestyle, and you get to network. And that type of networking can really, and if you're showing interest in that field, even though it's quite early to find a field or specialty that you're into, if you're showing interest, doctors like that, and you keep in contact with them, that's a source of networking that can help you much later on. Clinical electives is more for like clinical years, fifth or even sixth final years, like for us. And this is when we get to do hands-on practical work. And that is mainly, reaching out and trying to find doctors and hospital programs who can accept you to do that. Personally also struggling with it, so I can't really say too much about it. But research opportunities, I think Mouhit has more things to say about. But in terms of my personal research opportunities, there's a SWASH program with our uni. It's a good like starter. It's a good starter into learning how to do research. And if you're going into more clinical or basic research, and Mohit will talk about more opportunities there. So that's preclinical. Clinical is now we're talking, you finish your third year, you're in fourth and fifth or sixth year, right? So in terms of the one goal that you need to think about, and the one thing everyone asks, like, when should I do my step one? The best time is the summer between fourth and fifth year, or the winter break of fifth year. Like in my mind, it's that is the perfect, that's like the golden time. You can do it anytime else, but I feel like if you do it too early, you haven't finished pharmacology yet, and that's a really big part of step one. And if you do it later, you're kind of mixing in with a lot of clinical subjects that don't really cross over with step one content. So you're making it harder for yourself. So so in order to start and like apply for step one and USMLE, there's something called the ECFMG registration. It's very simple. I have the link here, and all you have to do is click it, follow the instructions. You pay a certain amount and you get certified to become an applicant. And then as an applicant, you get to book your exam whenever you do it, ideally during this time. And you should do it as soon as possible. I think they recommend like 3 to 6 months in advance to get the date that you want. Obviously, some dates can open up closer to the exam and you can switch it around. But ideally, you want to be prepared and have a date in mind and then go and start studying for it. And the third step is dedicated period. So online, if you guys watch videos and of people talking about how to prepare for step one, they're going to have something called the dedicated period. And it's a few months that they're just not doing anything else and just studying, and it's going to be difficult for us, for IMG, especially here, because either you're doing it alongside your schoolwork and you have practicals and classes. The best bet you have is the summer between fourth and fifth year, so that you can do your exam in winter break, so that's the best bet. But I think it's quite difficult to have dedicated period. Either ways, you'll have to find priorities and find ways to kind of like skip classes and study at the same time. Obviously, I don't recommend it, but it's something that I did, so keep that in mind. So when to start preparing? After you finish your pharmacology final, essentially. Am I saying you have to jump straight and start studying? Absolutely not. The first thing you need to do is have a study plan. Do not go into anything without a study plan. You're going to go over your head and stress yourself out. Don't do it. So what you're in the study plan, the two things you really need to focus on is how much time you're putting into studying in the beginning and the resources. Now, if you are right now like the first or third year, you have the time to experiment and choose the resources that you want. And I'll go over the resources like now. And then you will have, okay, these are the resources I'm going to use. And that's not you don't have to use anything else. Just dedicate yourself to this and study from it, and you'll be set, you know? And in order to further personalize your study plan, you can use YouTube and Reddit to read up and see different IMG experiences and, ask seniors who've also gone through it as well. In the table that you see in the corner, it's essentially what step one is asking you questions about, right? I think someone's question was like, what type of questions are there? There's going to be examples later in the presentation. And no, it's not going to be simple things like, where does the muscle insert, or like, what is this amino acid? No, it's very much like case report like style and a technical answer. And I'll show you an example though. So, right. So the study goal when you guys are starting your studying is to be able to apply your basic medical knowledge that you've studied all these 3 years, the first 3 years of med school, and to be able to apply it to a case report like question to provide a technical answer. That sounds complicated, but I'm going to show you what questions look like. I'm not going to ask you to solve it, obviously, but if you can see, there's 2 on the corner. And essentially, the steps that I think a question requires is that you look at a question, you try to recognize the intention of what they're asking, right? So in the first one, let's say they're asking about, they give you a disease and they say the synthesis of this specific amino acid is likely to be impaired. And then in the second one, they're like, oh, the patient has a cancer and it's spreading to the lungs. How's it getting there and which structure are they using? So in both of them, essentially, they're asking about the mechanism of the disease, which is pathophysio. But the first question is asking about biochemistry, and the second question is asking about anatomy. So now you already have a mindset of, okay, this is what it is. Then you read the whole thing, and you're understanding the case and patient, the disease, and you're catching key phrases or patterns or vignettes that lead you to at least get to the disease, right? And once you get the disease, you're like, okay, I have the disease, I have what they want. Now all I have to do is put them together and find that answer. And this way of thinking only comes from practice. It's not something that you're used to thinking because we're not taught this way during our entire medical school. So this is definitely something you learn through practice of doing a lot of real world questions. So going back to the resources and tips, the one thing I beg of everyone here, if you are finishing your pharmacology, you're like a fourth year, I think. Do not start reviewing content. Don't go and be like, I'm gonna start anatomy or histo, all that crap. Like, oh my God, please do not do it ever. Just straight up go for questions. And the good thing is that our uni gives us AMBOSS. I think I used AMBOSS because for farm initially because I got really bored just studying for it and I needed some type of different stimulation rather than just reading notes and doing Ankis. So questions are a really good way to start doing it, and it worked really well for pharmacology for me. But the big one that you probably have heard about is UWorld. UWorld is essentially a question bank, and when you purchase it for a certain amount of time, you get the question bank, which is around 4,000 questions and 2 self-assessments. And that is the golden resource. That and first aid, which is just a textbook. But first aid isn't a textbook in the sense of it's making you understand anything. Nope, that's literally just information given in the most bare bones way. And it's basically an easy grab. You're like, okay, there's this, there's a mnemonic, I need to know this. It's the bare minimum that you need to know, right? And then there's other self-assessments. There's UL self-assessment, NBMEs, and PA 120s. So if the one thing I would ask you guys to do, even though it seems very scary because you're going to think, oh, I don't know anything about this. Like I've never even thought about questions or content in that way. Do your first self-assessment the second you want to start studying for step 1. It can either be UL self-assessment number 1, or you can do AMBOSS because they also, during a specific months, they kind of promote a free self-assessment. I'm not sure which months right now, but they promote it and you can just do it. And then they give you a really nice breakdown of where you're weak at. I did it. They said I was weak everywhere. Amazing. And I failed. Obviously no one's expecting you to pass that. It's basically trying to put you and give you an idea of where you're at. Now that you have that, you have a really good breakdown of what you're weak at and what you need to focus on. Most likely, it's not that you don't know what you're doing and you don't know the content. It's most likely that you're not used to the type of questions they're asking you. So in order to tackle that problem, you need to be able to do questions. So UWorld, and my advice is that you do 80 to 90%, you complete UWorld. And during all that, you find like some questions that you're repeatedly getting wrong, or like some topics that you just can't get a grasp on. So you review those topics using supplementary sources. And then there's going to be that's going to happen it can take you from 3 months to 4 to 6. I'm not even sure how long it took me, but I think 4 to 6 was the amount of time. And then closer to your exam, you're going to do series of self-assessments. You're done with UWorld. You can do UWorld self-assessments 2, 3 onwards, and NBMEs, which are just practice exams. And during this time, you're essentially aiming to be in a range of 65 to 70% of a pass. And then that basically guarantees that you will pass your step 1, because now it's pass or fail. It's not a number. So supplementary resources, for me, I always prefer video resources. I'm not someone who can read something for too long. So there's a lot of sources. There's Pathoma, there's Osmosis, Boards and Beyond, Sketchy, and there's some that are specific to sources, like because in step 1 we also have a biostats section. It's very annoying, but thankfully it's quite easy as well once you get a grasp of the patterns of it. And there's this guy, his name is Randy Wheel, I think, and on YouTube he breaks it down really easily. And then there's something called Dirty Medicine, where he essentially breaks concepts down to very easy mnemonics that you can learn and just remember on the get-go when you're doing questions. So there's the understanding that you have to focus on, and then there's the retention. Retention is essentially active recall, Anki. This is like one thing, because like the whole exam, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't cram this. You need to be able to remember stuff and remember what you're weak at. So there's a lot of different decks, and you can use whatever works for you. I use Anking, but there's some that I honestly don't know how to say the name, so I'm not going to say it. That one, Duke's Pathoma and Pepper Farm Micro Pathoma. There's many different ones. I recommend Anking because it's kind of the best of both worlds in terms of covering first aid and UWorld, but because some can just focus on first aid, and I focus a lot of my review and my studying on UWorld rather than first aid. And yeah, like I mentioned, you will see some people online will say, I finished all of Pathfilm, I watched all the videos and I watched them twice, or I went through 2 reads of first aid and I was fine. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because then you're dedicating yourself to a resource rather than learning content and cases and how to approach questions, right? So instead of doing that, I say use resources, a set amount of resources as fill in the blanks. So you're like, oh, I actually don't know kidney failure at all. So I'm gonna watch the Pathoma kidney section, and I'll be good. But I'm kind of finding everything else, like cardio, I'm cool, right? So you don't need to do the cardio section for any of it, you know? So yeah, that is my resources for that. Okay, so I'm essentially done talking about the step 1. Now Mohit will take over and kind of go off of step 2. I know I unloaded a lot of information and there will be questions, so we will talk about that at the end. So yeah, Mohit, you can take over. Cool.
Hi, everyone. Hope all of you are doing well. Actually, thanks, Baria. You have covered a lot of aspects of the prep for the USMLE itself. And the similar prep really applies to step 2 on that hand, right? So step 2, essentially, when tackling the content itself, it's clinical. Now, the thing is, the clinical aspects we cover in maybe 5th year and 6th year, and it only includes 5 subjects, which includes OBGYN, pediatrics, then internal medicine and surgery. And psychiatry as well. So what happens is, generally when we're approaching a question towards step 2, we need to really know our step 1 content really well, because it will help us diagnose the disease. And then after we diagnose the disease, they would generally ask what's the next best step. So it could either be diagnosis or treatment. Now, it's very essential to understand what resources to use for step 2 and prepare for it, for instance, because many people in LFHK end up using final notes for their clinical years, and that really messes up the clinical decision making. So if you could, I didn't prepare slides, I was short on time, but if you could write these resources down for step 2 itself on a pen and paper, or I can chat it. So yeah, I can chat it 1 minute. Yeah. So for internal medicine, I would suggest you step up to medicine. It's a very good internal medicine book, which covers a lot of major topics. Actually, it covers everything. Then for surgery, for OBGYN, for pediatrics, there is also Boards and Beyond version of Step 2 CK. I really recommend that you watch those specific videos when preparing for Step 2. I didn't have it back then, but I think so while I was preparing for my step 3, it really helped, it reinforced the understanding to certain topics. And many people use online method, but I didn't find it very good. The reason being is it's not very comprehensive. So Boards and Beyond Step 2 CK and yeah, Step 2 CK is a very good book for actually preparing for, I mean, very good resource for preparing for your Step 2 alongside Step Up to Medicine. Also, you can use this book for your step 2, 1 minute. It's called White Coat Companion. It's like your first aid only, but a better version of first aid with everything explained. And it covers a lot of UWorld topics. And then that's the general content aspect of it. And then you jump into questions of UWorld step 2 itself, right? So in the 5th year, once you're done with step 1, I would suggest you again refresh your knowledge, your clinical aspect, because you do internal medicine in I think so 5th year, and you do surgery in 5th year. So if you use those resources to prepare for your internal medicine and surgery, then you're already done with the 2 major subjects of step 2 itself. And when you reach 6th year, it'll be a piece of cake. So coming back to the clinical aspects. So once you're done with these subjects, then generally people recommend giving step 2 end of 6th year. I gave it after 6th year, maybe like December post-graduation. Yeah, that's when I gave it because I was doing a research internship back in the US for a few months. So that's how I actually approached my prepping itself. And the reason why I gave it also back then was in December was because we graduate in July, right? And when we graduate in July, it is often recommended to get ECFMG certified when you apply to increase your chances of matching. And if I graduate in July, it takes at least 3 to 4 months to be ECFMG certified. So that's why you anyway skip a year. So that's why I gave it in December. So what I'm saying is generally, actually, it is very likely that once you finish graduation, that's a 6-year program, you'll have 1 year of a gap year. And in that 1 year of a gap year, you can do everything to really strengthen your CV itself and also give your step 2 and also improve on multiple aspects of your CV. Coming back to research opportunities. Actually, no. So I would like you to ask me some questions you have in regards to step 2 itself. Yeah, you can do step 2. No, actually, I don't think so. You can do step 2 in 5th year. The reason being is when you apply for your step 2, you need to certify that you have completed all the respective clinical subjects, and you do the majority of your clinical subjects in 6th year itself. So that's what I feel happens. I mean, unless there's a way out of that, because the university certifies that you're eligible for step 2. So that's the thing. So generally, you give it end of 6th year. Coming back to research opportunities, right? 1 minute. I have. Barry, have you posted the slide of that research opportunities which I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, wait, it's the next one, I think. It's how to get into research, right?
Yeah.
It should be on there now.
Yeah. So generally, US does not really expect you to be research powerhouses, right? You don't have to have multiple publications, like 20 to 30 publications. Okay, we do see IMGs having 20 to 30 publications, but that's not the norm anyways, right? You need to have some experience in research depending on what you're doing. If you want to apply to surgery, you need to have a lot of experience of research. If you're applying to internal medicine, you need to have minimal research. But right now, what's happening is many of the international medical graduates are becoming extremely competitive. So everyone has research, a good amount of research. And that's what sets the bar high. So generally, when I was in LFHK, it was difficult for me to really find appropriate research opportunities. The reason being is many of the, like, I didn't know who to reach out to, number one. Number two, many of the peers did not really share enough information on where are they doing research. So generally, you're stuck in a black hole of how to do research, right? So I would suggest that when you finished your first year, right, you just connect with your faculty in basic sciences, such as you do physiology, you do biochemistry, you do biology. You can start getting into research by approaching these people, and they do extensive amount of research in terms of basic science. That's what I have seen as of now, like Dr. Rudolph, then the immunology department, then the physiology department and the biochemistry department are heavily involved in basic science research. During this period, you're just experimenting. You're not really learning research, right? And when you enter third year, end of third year, right, you start emailing faculty for summer research positions. It could be US and Europe. Now, that is pretty difficult because in the US, they generally need they need a few publications before you actually uh, get accepted to a program in the US. But while I was in my medical school itself, there were several programs that actually offer research locally in Europe during the summer season itself. There's an Amagen Scholars Program, which is international. It's specifically in Europe, and I think so you can apply as an undergraduate medical student. I tried applying, but I didn't get the letter of recommendations on time, so I didn't apply eventually. Then there's also a WHO Global Internship Program, which is for undergraduate medical students who are interested in some sort of public health. There's also European Respiratory Society of Fellowships. So every specialty in Europe specifically have some sort of fellowships in which you can actually do research. Also, I would consider if you are staying in Czech Republic for the summer, you can consider doing research in Prague. Prague has really good research opportunities compared to, let's say, Hradec Králové itself. And they're very well known for their research findings over there. So all you have to do is just email the faculty, do your own research. But I would really recommend that you apply for the Amagen Scholars Program. It's a very prestigious program, and it's run across the major European institutions. Major European institutions, and it happens in the summer. It's specifically catered towards the undergraduate medical students. And now when you're in fourth year or fifth year, right, you're preparing for your steps, you're applying for clinical electives, and you know how Mayo Clinic research is taken in LFHK. They run it as a competition, but it's exactly not a competition. Okay, what you could do is when you're in your fourth year or fifth year, and when you want to go for a summer research opportunity in one of these years, right? You could apply, you could just email the faculty of Mayo Clinic, and they will happily take you in. It is a bit of hard work. You'll have a lot of rejections, but they will accept you likely. But Mayo Clinic is not the only option, right? There are several major institutions across the United States where you can actually go for your summer undergraduate short-term research as a J1 scholar. And I think so I would suggest that you do that. It helps you build connections, number one. Number two, it helps you show that you have some US research experience, and it gets you also a letter of recommendation, which can be helpful when you're applying for your residency match itself. That's about it in terms of research. So in summary, you start just connecting in basic science faculties in second and third year. Try to apply for top research programs in Europe. Even if you don't get that, you can apply to local universities in Europe itself. Many of them are in Germany, and many of them are in Switzerland. Then by fourth or fifth year, if you want to go Mayo to do research, good. If not, if you don't get into Mayo, you can apply for other institutions. Or another option is you can also do a one-year research fellowship after sixth year. So after sixth year, when you have that gap year, I would suggest you have nothing to do really. So all you have to do is just wait until you apply for the next math season. So you can apply for these fellowships after 6th year as well, and it's for 1 year, and it really helps you build your research aspect of the CV. It again depends on which specialty you want to do. If you want to do internal medicine, you don't need a lot of research. If you want to do surgery, you need a lot of research. Coming back to, yeah, that's about it in terms. Could you go to the previous slide? Yeah. In regards to the number of publications, you don't really need a lot of publications. The reason being is they don't expect you to have a lot of publications. Maybe 1 or 2 should be good enough. And in regards to extracurricular, right? So many people ask me, like, how should I really build my extracurricular aspect of the CV? There's no right answer to that. Okay. So your CV should really show who are you as a person, as Bari had previously pointed out. For instance, someone is into art. They can add art into the CV. I'm into a lot of innovation and technology, so I added a lot of technology into my CV. It was not really a lot of clinical aspects. And when I interviewed with programs, they actually enjoyed really reading my CV, understanding what it is going. So you need to really find out what really interests you the most and focus your extracurriculars on that. So you're able to build your character, number one. Number two, you're also able to tailor your personal statement eventually to write something that has actually shaped you as a person. Yeah, so that's in regards to extracurricular activity. Some people, what I've heard is they started doing pottery classes. Traveling could be as an extracurricular activity, but it's not really counted. Everyone writes traveling. Your extracurricular should be something that you've pursued for years, and it should really develop you as a person, right? That's about it for that aspect. And now tips to applying for residency match. So I would like to break down this into timeline. Okay. So in 4th year, 5th year, you write your step one. 6th year end or 6th year, 7th year, I would take that gap year, 7th year. Okay. So 6th year end, you'll most likely write your step two versus 7th year mid, you'll most likely write your step two. Then if you have a lot of time, you can do a research position in the US. You can also build your CV on clinical electives and observerships. Of note that clinical electives are only possible before graduation. Now, the problem with LFHK is we don't have this system called VSLO. Okay. VSLO really restricts on the amount of clinical electives we can do. The only way to approach that is there are only 3 programs that actually provide clinical electives. One is Cleveland Clinic. The other one is in UT, I think Southwestern, and University of Alabama, Birmingham. These are the only 3 programs that provide clinical electives for non-VSLO candidates. Okay. What's the other approach, right? If you want to do clinical electives in 6th year, in either internal medicine or surgery, the other approach is you start emailing faculty by 5th year itself because it takes time to process documents and all. So, but before that, I would suggest, yeah. So before that, I would suggest you finish your step one, right? So you start emailing faculties in end of 5th year, and most likely you might get a position and do a clinical elective in the US. If not, you can do several observerships that exist post 6th year. So post 6th year, there's so many observership programs in the US that is run by major institutions like Cleveland. Cleveland runs one, UT Southwestern runs one. So all the big university programs run multiple observership programs for medical physicians or graduates. And that's how you really build your CV in general. In regards to documents, before you apply, you need to have 4 documents ready, which is very important. Number one is your step one, step two scores, definitely. Step three is not a requirement when you apply. The second one is MSPE, so it's a medical school performance evaluation. Once you create a WhatsApp group chat or something, I will share how it exactly looks like. It's like a template that you have to really upload into your ERAS residency match when you are, ERAS residency match when you're applying. The third thing is your personal statement. Your personal statement should be really describing who you are. For instance, it shouldn't just be catered around medicine. People want to see how you grew as a person. Okay. There are a lot of personal statement tips that I will share eventually. I have made a lot of personal statement tips. And the fourth one, what you need is your ECFMG certification before you apply. Now, ECFMG certification is a barrier towards matching. You can apply without not being ECFMG certified, but the thing is programs often filter out people who are not ECFMG certified initially. So you need to be ECFMG certified. That takes around 3 to 4 weeks post step 2. And you need your OET exam results, which is an English test. That is pretty easy to do. That's about it for this thing. And once you apply, then hopefully you'll get a lot of you'll get interviews, and then you rank that interviews accordingly, and then most likely you will match. But that's the whole match season, how it goes, which we need to have another seminar because it's a bit complicated in regards to that. So that's about it, I feel. Yeah. I mean, I know there'll be a lot of questions coming through, so you can throw up all.
Thank you guys very much. And please, if there's any questions, please do mention them in the chat. We'll be waiting for some questions for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we'll end the seminar. Thank you.
So step 1 and step 2 costs. So step 1 costs $950. Step 2 costs $950. So it's $1,700 in total. I mean, sorry, more than that. Yeah. $1,900. Yeah. Okay, institution for electives. So, yep.
You can go ahead. I'll ask after you're done. Thank you.
Yeah. Institutions for electives. There are 3 institutions: Cleveland. The second one is University of Alabama, Birmingham. The third one is this program. It's Yale, and Yale itself. And that's about it. These are the non-VSLO programs. Unless you force the university to really apply to VSLO, but I doubt. I've been trying that for like 4 years. When I was in LFHK, it never worked out. So VSLO opens your opportunities to 200 to 300 programs. It's called VSLO. So VSLO is a system of application where international medical students can apply for electives and research opportunities through a centralized application system. And for that to happen, you need to be registered as an institution to VSLO. I think so. The only person who can help that is the academic senate, who can probably help students, help the university to get onto VSLO, and then it can be a centralized application process. So this really restricts a lot of options that we have.
I think our uni has some type of partnership with like AMO, but I would never recommend AMO.
Yeah.
You would rather reach out to doctors personally, or hopefully, inshallah, one day we get VSLO, but it's not looking great, honestly. We've tried. Okay, let me use. Right. So
AMO,
sorry, do you want to continue with AMO, or because I saw questions about Anki and I don't know if you want to go ahead.
Continue with Anki. I will continue with AMO.
Okay, cool. So for the Anki thing, I'm quite sure a lot of us use it. I use Anking, and so like I mentioned before, like the 2 big resources I recommended was UWorld and First Aid. Me personally, I mainly focus my preparation on UWorld rather than First Aid, because First Aid it covers everything and in so much detail, and majority of it you will realize while doing self-assessment, especially because it is that you don't need all that information. You kind of need what the step 1 focuses on. And it's usually, honestly, like immunology or like very niche, so much of immunology and like the first 3 chapters of pathoma. And then you're wasting your time going over First Aid for like respiratory or something. Like for me, I was struggling with respiratory, like as a system, to even understand the physio behind it. I couldn't, then when I went into my step 1, I don't even think I got a question about it, So I think to go over First Aid and focus on First Aid is a waste of time. That's my opinion. And Anki gives a good amount of First Aid and UWorld, and you get to filter the tags and choose which cards you want according to what your weak points are. And question bank topic wise, or randomized. Okay. I don't think it's that deep. I think you can do whatever you want with that. I think closer, obviously, to your exam, you can do it randomized. But for me, I always use UWorld as a learning resource rather than testing myself. For me, testing was always self-assessments, right? But UWorld itself, I was learning from it. I didn't care if I was getting things wrong and if I was like failing like my blocks. I don't care. I just need to get the information out. So whether I'm doing it topic-wise, whether I'm doing it randomized, it didn't really matter. But topic-wise will help you more in terms of retaining and understanding that topic, obviously, right? And you can do it according to what you're learning in uni or whatever topic you have with your doctors. Randomized is probably better in terms of approaching UWorld blocks. But again, like you're again, use UWorld as a learning resource, not something that you're testing yourself with. Okay, someone
So-
asked why not recommend AMO, and I'm gonna let Mohit you talk about that.
Yeah,
'cause-
hi.
Mhm.
So when we're really talking about electives and observerships, right? Most of the electives are, AMO, right? So there are several, when you enter this elective and observership process, there are two ways to approach it. You either go directly to an institution and approach it, or either you go through these middle ground agencies. Now, these middle ground agencies take a lot of students in, and it's most likely an observership. You get a very horrible recommendation on letter that is very generic. Now, when you're going directly to an institution, what happens is you get a personalized recommendation letter. You're working with an individual faculty for a while, and you can get multiple recommendations letter because you'll rotate with multiple faculties during that period of duration, which is very important because we IMGs don't have enough time to really do maybe 6 months of clinical electives, right? And now the ERAS application has also changed, right? So previously, what used to happen is we could add 20 experiences. Like that was years ago. 2 years ago. Now we can only add 10 experiences. So in these 10 experiences should be really good that really shapes your CV to what you are. AMO is very expensive, number one. AMO gives you very generic letters of recommendations, number two. And number three, it's most likely going to be an observership than an actual clinical elective. I would say that if you finish your step one early fifth year or late fifth year, that means end of, let's say, June, July, then you can start applying for clinical electives in the following year itself to these three institutions which I mentioned, or four institutions.
I have a question. Can I please interrupt?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I think in the end of fourth year, we have two, I don't know if they are clinical electives or not, but we have something for internal and we have something for surgery at the end of
Yeah.
this year. Now, if we can manage to do these electives or subjects in hospitals, would they be considered as recommendation letters if we do get them done in the US, for example, or I don't know.
Wait, Mohit, do you want to talk about that, or could I?
I can talk about it, and you can add on it.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
now, what during the ERAS application, what the US really suggests that is they want 3 to 4 recommendation letters from US itself, right? The ones at the hospitals are very local; they don't really count, and that's why many people do their clinical electives in the US, so they can get 3 to 4 3 to 4 letters. Unless it's a very well-known person that you're doing a clinical elective with in LFHK and he's renowned across the world, then maybe that could count. But generally, the local ones don't really count or have value.
But I mean, if you can manage to get a good spot somewhere, can it be a valid recommendation letter, or could it be considered as a clinical elective, as you say?
No, if you get a good place in US, it counts as a valid one. It doesn't matter that you're doing it for uni or not.
Okay, so these subjects, if I manage to do them in the US somehow, I can consider it as a clinical elective. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. The only thing about that I would just want to add is that in fourth year, I know which one you're talking about. I think it might be difficult to get US hands-on experience by then. I think the best case scenario is observerships, and I don't know if our uni would count that because our uni needs certain requirements that you're doing in the hospital, and that only counts if you're doing hands-on work. But observership does not count as hands-on work. And it depends on if the doctor you're seeing there in US is able to sign off for you and say, yeah, you did that, but if you didn't do that, it can basically lead to a lot of complications. So obviously, if you find something that allows you to do hands-on work, yeah, you get that ticked off for uni. And you leave a good impression. They can give you a letter of recommendation, but it might be difficult because I think I personally couldn't find many. But I wish the best for anyone who is trying to do that. So
I mean,
Thank
unless
you.
you
Thank you.
have connections
Yeah,
who you could
connections.
work with in the US, and they could provide you a letter of recommendation for two weeks, then I think so that's counted as valid letter of recommendations as well, right? Because generally what people do, I think so. I know now I remember what elective are you actually talking about. Towards the end of fourth year, we have these two random electives that we can do anywhere
Yeah.
in the world. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot about that. So coming back to that, you could do it in the US, okay? And that will be counted as valid recommendation letters on its own. You could also do your pre-state practice in the US. You
Yeah.
have
That is
you have
in
3
sixth year,
months.
right?
Yeah, that's in
Sixth
sixth
year,
year.
yeah.
That is in sixth year.
Yeah. You have like 2 months of internal medicine. You have 2 months of surgery. That's enough time to actually get clinical electives and observerships sorted out. And in fact, the university LFHK sponsors half of it. You have to apply to this very local fund of LFHK. I don't know what it is called. That's
The
what I
mobility
did.
fund. Yeah.
Yeah. And they will give half of the money. So you save a lot of money overall, right? When I applied, I got like how much? 67,000 crowns back.
Big baller. Anyways, thank you so much. And one last thing before I go on mute. Is there like a specific duration to how long these clinical practices should be, or can it be anything from 2 weeks to 1 month to 2 months? It doesn't
So
matter.
generally, what they recommend is they want it to be between 3 months to 6 months, right? That is very difficult for us to get as IMGs. So what I would suggest is in sixth year, when you do your pre-state practice in US, okay, either for internal medicine or surgery, then you can do an additional 1 or 2 months post graduation because you have limited time.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I was looking at the questions. Someone asked about like how your day looks in residency. So if you want to go ahead, Mohit, and talk about that.
That's a very broad question, but I would like to answer that. So I'm doing an internal medicine program. Okay, so it's a 3-year program. It's pretty intense. So the first year we are an intern. We come as knowing nothing, and we don't know anything, right? So we are just it's mostly like documentation most of the time in the first year, and then you start managing patients towards the end of the first year, and so I wake up at like 6. So the hours are very long, right? Our inpatient rotations last between 12 hours to 14 hours. But that's I think so that's manageable and doable. You'll get a hang of it eventually. Then in second year, I think so it gets a bit more intense. It's again same between 12 to 14 hours a day, which is all right, I feel. In the Yeah, so I wake up at 6:30. Then I mean I wake up at 6. Go to the hospital, start at 6:30, round on patients till 8:30, then discuss the cases with attendings till 12. Then we complete our notes, do our tasks, and come and go home. We're home by maybe 7:30. So that's the general duration of work hours in the US itself. And I think so that's manageable.
So someone asked just for the UWorld and question banks. All right, for fourth years, right, once you finish your final is when you go into preparation. So the first thing I'd recommend, obviously, is like I mentioned, self-assessment. It gives you a really good idea of what you're weak at and which topics you don't really need to worry about that much. yes, I don't think you should start reviewing. Instead, you do, like, let's say you do a Euro block and you're starting off slow. I would never recommend going straight into 40 questions because each block essentially has, wow, I didn't even explain what step one was. Okay, I just realized that. But it's essentially like 7 blocks of an exam, and each block is 40 questions. And it's like 7 to 8 hours long. You get allocated time of breaks, and you do it however you want, really. So one block is 40 questions. And you ideally at the end, you want to be able to do 40 questions in a go without taking a break. But obviously, when you're starting off, it's nearly impossible. You'll lose your mind, honestly. So I would start off like maybe 5 to 10 daily and slowly build it up until you're able to have the stamina to do 40 questions. Um, and then, yes, so let's say you start off with 5, you do those 5 questions, you can do it tutor or timed. Tutor is essentially like you do the question, you get the explanation and the right or wrong answer right after it. Timed is you do all of it and then like without finding out if you got it right or wrong, and then at the end you get all the explanations. So you can do it like tutored, start off with tutored because it's easier that way. You do a question, let's say you got it wrong, you read the explanation, figure out why you got it wrong, why the correct answer is correct and why the other answers just don't line up, but could still be like differential diagnosis or something that is close enough to get you confused. But it's ideally to do it this way. And then I would do that question. And then let's say it was about like renal failure, like I mentioned before. You go to first aid to the part of renal failure and you kind of find exactly what you did wrong and add on any type of clues that would help you to get that correct answer later. So that's the best way of studying. And then additional step, if you want to integrate Anki into it, is that Anki basically has like all of the content from New World and First Aid. So you could go specifically to that card or that topic and like unsuspend those cards and study those on a daily basis. But yeah, the one thing I always say, never, never start reviewing content. It's going to be the biggest waste of your time and question banks, 100%. And then
Yeah.
somebody asked, oh yeah, I just saw that you said no final notes. I agree.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't use final notes at all. You need to really understand the content in depth. Like for step one, the major topics are path, farm, and I think so physio. Physio is difficult. You need to really understand physio in depth and understand what's actually going on. That will make your life easy for step one.
Exactly.
Uh,
Thing is, I agree, and I'm on both ends of the scale where it's like don't use final notes. I use final notes, but I always just complemented it with Euro. Like for me, to not like I would at least do one Euro question before I went to sleep because I need to be able to still integrate that knowledge somehow, you know? But I know that final notes it makes it easier to study it. But as long as you're thoroughly understanding the content and the topic is what your goal is. So whatever way
Yeah.
honestly works for you, just make sure to use the right resources that don't give you empty gaps of knowledge when you know something. Yeah, and then somebody asked, yeah, so the first few years it will be limited in terms of your CV, electives, and all that. Again, like I mentioned, it's mainly building a really good core of knowledge for step one, because the better you study the first 3 years, the less time you have to waste later on being like, oh, I forgot the Krebs cycle or some shit like that, honestly. And then it won't, you will have to go back to it, but you're literally doing pharmacology. What does that have anything to do with the Krebs cycle, right? So just know it now and then make sure to apply it with relevant USMLE resources, like I mentioned. And it will be really smooth for you. But in terms of networking, which you specified, so specifically so you could network either within the uni to get more research opportunities, but like Mohit's mentioned, research within our uni is very limited in terms of how much value it has. So what you could do is like maybe look up, let's say Yale, right? You go on the Yale Medical, kind of look at their academic directors or like specific doctors. And I know it's quite early for you guys to know what specialty you want to go into. So maybe internal is the best bet because internal does like encapsulate a lot of topics. And just message them, say that you introduce yourself, say your intention, like what you want. And yes, most of them are going to be cold emails. You're not going to get a reply, but you can get really lucky and a doctor be very helpful and guides you. And then once you have people who are talking back to you, you need to be able to maintain connections with them because those are the people who can get you more like opportunities to go to the hospital there and actually have hands-on practice, we can give you LORs, letters of recommendations. And essentially, they'll give it a really good word for you even when you're doing your match and you're trying to get into residency down the line, right? So the more you're able to connect with people, the better, right? And it's just basically a really big ball game of hoping somebody replies to you. Right? It's really stressful, yeah, but it's good in the sense that if we can connect also with more alumni, it's really good that Mohit's here, and like connect and find more opportunities that way. Mohit, if you have anything else to add to that,
Yeah,
feel free, of
yeah,
course.
and I think so. The first year you definitely can't do anything. Okay, like
Yeah, for sure.
generally, yeah, leave first year. That's not counted. Now, we need to really decide early on which pathway we want to go. Number one, whether you want to go to the US or whether you want to go to the UK. Everyone, and some people want to stay in Czech Republic. That's completely all right. But we need to determine where we want to go. That will set a clear goal, right? Why I'm saying this is because if you start thinking too late, like in fifth year or sixth year, that I want to go to the US, you'll spend at least 2-3 years building your CV, XYZ. That's not appropriate. That's all I wanted to say for in regards to this. And the second year is mostly you can start getting your hands in research, basic science. Just ask Rudolph that I want to learn maybe pipetting, whatever it is, and his lab. I think so. Who's the other professor in biology?
Honestly, don't remember.
Yeah,
Vera
it starts with a
Kralova.
V. Yeah,
Sorry?
Vera
Varkalova.
Kralova.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, they will teach you happily,
Mhm.
or just email the biochemistry department. I want to learn basic science wet lab techniques. And then once you learn those techniques, you can do a research project in physiology because they're very basic science heavy. That's in your second year. You can do a lot. I didn't do that personally because no one was there to guide me. And I think so only three people from LFHK are currently four people from LFHK are currently in the US. One is in surgery. One is a Czech guy. One is a alumni who graduated 4 years ago. So, and one is me, right? So that's why no one was there to guide me, right? So in second year, you can just work on your research, right? Third year, you can start also working on your research. And then fourth year, you can start applying for opportunities. That's when your CV will preliminarily be ready to apply for opportunities. And that's about it. You don't have to do crazy research. I'm again warning you. You don't have to be a scientist. You just need to do some research, maybe 2 hours a week.
And speaking of research, like I'm literally just bringing this back because Mohit mentioned like basic research skills like pipetting or whatever. I did SWOT program and I know it doesn't really have impact too much, but what I really liked about it was that I managed to get a position in the biochemistry department and I learned a lot of basic research skills like Mohit mentioned. And obviously not everyone can get that position. I think they only open it up to like one or two students. But if anything, I would say it's a really good department. They're really kind and they really do teach you a lot of basic research that really helps in the long run if you are interested in research in general. And yeah, biochemistry I would definitely recommend for sure. And a SWOT program again, like I think value-wise, no, but in terms of the experience where you're doing research, you're doing basic experiments like cytotoxicity stuff, and then you're able to form an abstract and then present in a conference. All of these are skills that you learn to become better when you're doing it in a more wider scale in like US or with a proper team. So
Yeah.
yes, in terms of
Yeah.
value, no, but in terms of skill set and like your personal competence, I would recommend it for sure. Yeah, that's why I
So,
put that.
and I would say the first 3 years is like essentially building your CV and gaining those skill sets to apply for better opportunities. You won't include these first 3 years into your ERAS CV, the residency match application, right? Because from fourth, fifth, sixth year, your CV needs to be so it should be eye-catching, I would say. And spend the first 3 years building the skill sets, the last 3 years building a CV, right? The first
good
3
way to
years
put
are your
it.
preliminary CV. Yeah, that's a good breakdown, I would say. That's what I did. I was into technology, so I didn't do much research. I did a lot of technology research, which is not even related to medicine. Coming back to second question, why did you choose the US and not the Czech? Okay, Czech, for example. So I'm bad at languages, and I couldn't learn Czech. That's one reason. Although Czech does offer an opportunity, I think so. If you finish, you can finish residency in Czech Republic as well. I mean, there's nothing right or wrong in this, right? For me,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
wanted to study. I wanted to pursue my training in an English-speaking country. Number one. Number two, I think so. The innovations, the technology, the system, the healthcare system is much more developed in the US. Okay, there's insurance issues, but that's all right. But in terms of how you approach a patient is very different in the US compared to Czech Republic. Number three, it's the financial aspect as well. So if you compare 5 countries or 10 countries in the world, right? The US post residency, you get paid like quite a lot, quite significant actually, compared to the other countries. So that's one of the reasons for me. But yeah, actually, that's a major reason for me. But yeah.
I think for why I'm also not going to continue in Czech Republic is because US, one thing I realized just talking to people who did stay in Czech Republic is that they don't really, I think they expect a lot from you when you're in the hospital. And I think that's really scary for me. I'd rather be taught and like the doctors in US who I've spoken to, and when they talk about the residency and like the beginning internship years, they really like think you like they'll act like you know nothing and then they'll teach you from ground up whatever your thing is, and I really appreciate that because it's more of a direction. And I don't think like yes, okay, obviously, we're learning from this medical school, but to actually apply and become a doctor, I think US does that. Like US builds you as
Yeah.
a doctor, but Czech Republic, they're like, oh yeah, you graduated med school, try to be a doctor now. That's like the mindset I feel like is a difference. That's just personally what I see. So I don't like that. And every other
Yeah.
reason that Mohit has
Yeah.
mentioned, I also agree with. So yeah, that's why.
And also, I didn't choose NHS for primarily 2 reasons. The training is longer, right? So you do
Mhm.
FI1, FI2, that's 2 years. Then if you want to do internal medicine, that's an additional 5 years. That's 7 years. And then after that, you want to pursue a specialty, that's another 3 years. So that's already 5, 3, 10, 11 years down the line training to do cardiology, for instance. Besides that, you have to apply to you have to continuously apply to positions every 2 to 3 years. So you do FI1, FI2, then you have to apply again to internal medicine training. It's like a competition. Then again, you have to apply to whatever XYZ training. And we do think that getting into NHS is easy. Okay, it might be easy, but it's a struggle in the long run throughout the process. In the US, however, you apply once, you get in. Then if you want to do a fellowship, maybe there is competition if you want to do gastro, cardio, but you can get a specialty eventually, right? And you have to apply a second time, that's it. And then you're done with your training. So in 5 to 6 years, you're done with all your training. After that, you're earning good enough to live a comfortable life. That's about it. That's pretty simple.
One more question, please.
Hmm.
Sorry, we're taking too much of your time, but how guaranteed of a path is it? Like, if I'm committed, I'm dedicated, I put in the time, it's secure enough, right? I've been told by other people. I think you mentioned there's 3 or 4 people who have been to the US from our faculty, and it doesn't seem proportionate to the number of people that are talking about it. So
We're just 50 people in, I think so. How many people are in your batch right now?
we're about 40, 50.
How many of them are Germans? How many of them are British? How many of them are Indians? How many of them are internationals?
Everyone's an international, but I mean, there's a majority Indian Arab, you know.
Okay. So what I feel is people did not have guidance, right? They have to be committed from day one. Yeah, it seems difficult. I do believe it is difficult. It is stressful. When I applied for the match season, there was, I had like only 4 interviews. The reason being that because our alumni is not strong enough, right? Otherwise, it is, if you're committed, you can definitely get in, right? If you follow the advice that Baria gives, if you follow what I'm trying to say, I mean, mine was not a very organized session, but if you follow the tips that I'm giving, I think so you can definitely secure a place in the US. It's not that hard as people make it out to be. The thing is, hardly people went from Czech Republic to US. That's the issue. And they say it's very hard. The exams are very hard. But you're studying the same thing for pathology. Everyone, all the seniors say, use Pathoma. And then you get a 1 from whatever that guy's name is. What's his name? Doctor, uh, the pathology expert. Yeah.
So,
So,
five.
Sorry.
No, nothing.
yeah. So if you commit, I think so you can do it. It's not very difficult as people make it out to be, unless you have to do something extraordinary like surgery, for which you have to definitely put in a lot of work. And I'm not going to deny that it is difficult. For, let's say, radiology, or for, let's say, radiology, it's also very difficult. But what they want is more research, right? So how do you really integrate research into your daily life when you're applying for radiology from second year? That's a different story altogether. So that's what I'm trying to say.
And may I ask what field you're in right now, or what you're looking to specialize into?
So I'm currently in internal medicine, right? So I'm planning to specialize into maybe pulmonary care versus hematology, oncology, depending on how much, again, research I'm done in the next 1.5 years, because I apply again next year. If that's not an option, then I will apply to some other field. But I plan to do a fellowship of my interest eventually. And it's too early for me to decide in the first 5 months of residency what I want to do.
Best of luck, Barry, as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, someone asked about the step 2 score, competitiveness. If you want to talk about that, I have not done step 2. So
Okay. Yeah. So many people think that scores are everything. Definitely they are, but it's not everything. What really matters is your score competitive enough to pass the initial filter? So we are well aware that each program, I mean, I'm aware that each program gets 8,000 applications every year to 10,000 applications every year. So they can't screen through all the applications. So your score should be competitive enough to really screen out, to really pass that filter. After that, it does not really matter, right? So I would say a competitive step 2 score is anything greater than 245. Anything greater than 245 is good enough. If you're obviously pursuing competitive specialties like surgery, you need a 250 or something. But I think so, if you're above 245, you're good enough to apply to any internal medicine and neurology program if you like neurology.
just to add on to what you were saying earlier, by the way, of how hard it is to get into a US residency. Honestly, I don't think I can say that much, but one thing I would rather say is that if you commit to US, and I'm not saying don't have backup programs or something like that, for sure go for that. But if you commit and you know that you want US, like trust me, you can make it happen. You know, like maybe okay, worst comes to worst, you don't get a match. There's like other programs like a SOAP program or something. I forgot if that's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
where it's like
yeah.
it's like there's still some spots left from places you didn't actively apply to or something, and you can apply for them. And okay, worst comes to worst, you don't get that match. You can do continued research or whatever you feel like is needed to do to make your CV better so that you can apply the next match season. I think there are opportunities, like Mohit mentioned, it's just that there's not enough LFHK people telling you what exactly to do. You know, like with a UK, it's really easy. Like it's quite, I think a lot of people know. With Czech Republic, yeah, it's quite smooth sailing. There are people who know how to do that. But with US, it seems so daunting, but I don't really think it is. I think the most scariest part is probably like, oh my God, I have to do step 1 alongside of studying for all like what I'm studying for in med school. That's such a hassle. but it's so, in my opinion, it is quite easy to integrate early on when you know that you want to do US and like study it according to your subjects as well. All you have to do is use resources and then find like and time manage, which is something you guys have all been doing anyways. Like all these years, you're learning how to study or how to time manage and like still take a break and all that. It is so doable. Like, trust me, once you finish step one, which is like such a pain in the ass, once you're done with that, step two, you study, make sure you get that good mark, whatever mark you're aiming for. Then there's that research and all that. And slowly it will come to you. And honestly, it will be enjoyable, hopefully, for you guys. And yeah, like, so really, it is so possible. Don't think that it isn't, because it is. And
I
I'm
think
saying that
so.
I'm saying that as
Yeah.
like someone who hasn't even touched or done step two. So
I think
it's
so.
just about
The
possibility.
the USMLE journey on its own will actually change you as a person. It will make you more. It'll grow you as a person, right? You're competing with international people.
Yeah.
You will develop so many skill sets. You'll know how to talk to people. You know how to build networks, make connections.
Exactly.
You will find your interest eventually, right? And there's a place for every interest in the US. Okay, every interest in the US. For instance, as I mentioned before, I'm into medical technology research, right? So I'm doing a lot of medical technology research in the US in my program itself. And they accepted me for who I am, right? I didn't have crazy research. I just had like proper research for maybe like 4 months, which is not significant compared to other people who are doing 1.5 years to 2 years research. And I think so. That's what they want. They will accept you if you really cater to their needs of the program. Number one, if you really match the vibe of the program, you need to really be committed to this path. I feel number one, and it is difficult. I was anxious during the math season. It was a different whole story, right? That 1 year, I I I was not myself. The reason being is I was just stressed in general, right? I had applied for a GMC license. I was thinking of going to the UK because I had like only 4 interviews. The chances of having 4 interviews and matching was very low, according to IMG Reddit. So it scared me out. What I did was I had my interview date for NHS on February 28th. And 2 weeks later, I had the match result come out. I didn't I mean, the NHS did not probably. I mean, I wasn't called back by the NHS interview, but then I got my match results on the 10th of March, and it was a very different perspective. So I think so. It's like manifestation, right? If you manifest that, if you see yourself that you will be in the US, you will do all the things that takes it to really turn the stones. And I think so. It is definitely possible for anyone. It's not that hard. We have 6 years to actually change anything we want to do, right? We also have, even if you're in fourth year, you have 2 years to actually build on everything you want to do. And it is completely possible.
Just about the failure and like if you fail step one, step two, honestly, I think that if you listen to what I said about step one, you will not fail. Like, and trust me, the whole self-assessment stuff, if you stay within 65 to 70% range, you're not failing. Like, I don't know, like I want to be able to reassure you guys and say it is 100% possible. The only way you fail step one is if you're doing self-assessments, you're seeing you're getting like 40 or 50%, and you're like, ah, screw it, I'm still gonna do step one. That's just stupid on your end, really. You should think logically, be like, okay, I'm not going to pass with a 45% if I'm getting that consecutively in my self-assessments. You move your exam. For me, like even though I said that summer between fourth and fifth is the best time, or the winter break in fifth year. I didn't even manage to do it in the winter break. I had to push it to April, which was just luckily because we had like a week break, and I managed to go back and do it. And because during that time I was anxious, I was over my head. I was like, okay, I'm not falling closer to 70%. I feel like I'm gonna fail. I feel like I'm gonna fail. So I pushed it just a bit, and alhamdulillah, I passed, right? So I think, especially now that step one is just pass or fail, stick with the 65 to 70% and you'll be good. You won't. Step 2, I cannot say. Inshallah, I don't fail. But again, there are a lot of ways during your preparation where you're getting self-assessed and all this that tells you where you're at, and you can adjust your schedule accordingly. So don't think about failure. Just think that you're going to pass anyways. You have to have a little bit of ego when it comes to this too. But yeah, there's mobility fund questions as well. And I think that's it, unless anyone else has questions. Even though you guys are talking about mobility fund, keep at it.
Yeah. So I think so for second and third year, I think so just determine where you want to practice eventually. Whether you want to practice in UK or US or Czech Republic or Germany or Australia. There's nothing wrong or right. It depends what lifestyle you want to live, right? That's about it. And then you choose that journey, stay committed to it, and work towards that. No country is right or wrong. Number one, every country has their own advantages and disadvantages. If you don't have a green card or US citizenship, then you're slightly at a disadvantage, but not much, right? I don't have a green card or a US citizenship because sometimes you're limited to the number of programs you can apply with a visa. That's about it, I think so. And just stay committed. I think so. It is possible. It's not that difficult. I mean, it is difficult, it is stressful, but it is possible. And
Yeah.
I would suggest you guys need to unite as an LFHK group. You need to share individually your resources with each other. I know when I was in my year, no one really shared anything, right? It was like a secret society of Illuminati, and we need to unite. And maybe what if 21 people on this call match into the US? That significantly increases the amount of alumni we have in the US, right?
Exactly.
And just be united, share research opportunities, work together, work in groups. If you work in teams, you can publish more papers. If you work in research, you can publish more papers. And that's about it. I would suggest, that's about it. Yeah.
And like Harsh mentioned that afterwards we're gonna have a group chat and you guys will already be well connected. Just like make sure to stay that way, because I personally, when I was studying for step 1, I didn't really have anyone else going through the same struggles. So it was a bit difficult to do that by myself. So when you guys are all together, it's always best to study. I won't say study together, but like have the same, like know that someone else is going through the same thing. And I know that a few years ago there was a USMLE or US group chat, and that like successfully failed somehow, and it was so bad. Like no one was talking on it. So if this does happen this time out,
I was part of
were
the
you on
group
it?
chat. It never worked.
It
Yeah.
never worked, right? And I was on it for a second, but then like everyone was so dry, or like there was nothing happening. So if a group chat does happen afterwards, please like be active. Again, think about it like this is US. The people you're with, they're possibly going to be someone who's working in the US with you. So that's the type of personality you want to give somebody who's already in US. So that's my biggest recommendation, and stay well connected, guys. And hopefully like me and Mohit can also contribute as much as possible and help out as much as we can too. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for paying attention, guys. And
Thank you guys so much for this seminar. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope it was beneficial for everyone.